How is flying actually safe? Is it safe? I don't know. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I get a unique perspective in that. So within the company that I work for, I also do an additional duty where I there's a program that the FAA developed called ASAP. It's a safety reporting program, and to put it very simply, it's a you can self-report to this program, and you are granted an extreme measure of confidentiality. Right now, obviously, there are some things that would be exclusionary if you were, alcohol, drugs, intentional malpractice, things like that. But outside of that, it is like you are given. I'm not going to use the word immunity because that's not the right word. But if you think of it in that context, in the legal sense, right, you can say anything you want. We can't hold it against you. It's the same idea. You get this confidentiality, and so I get to on a monthly basis sit down with individuals and do a debrief. So they have filled out a report. They have reported on either a mistake they made, an error that was trapped, a problem that they saw that maybe didn't manifest. And I get to dig in a little bit and find out, what was the origin of it? Was there maybe a procedural error? Was there a knowledge gap? Was there somebody else that influenced this perception? Or, hey, did everything go right? And what did we do that leads to that success? So I really get to peel back the onion on the safety things. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm like the ER doctor, right? That tells their kids, don't go jump on the pogo stick outside because I've seen what pogo sticks can do. I know all of the hyperbole that can be, and I'm still the first person to put both my kids on the airplane with me. Like
Hmm.
there was a statistic recently, and folks out there can fact check this or feel free to argue it. I don't know the validity. I know the source. There was a doctor, Jimmy Chung was his name, and they healthcare and aviation work very hand in hand, and healthcare tries to match the safety levels and mechanisms of aviation. And he stated that if aviation incidents occurred at the same rate that healthcare incidents occur, which I would characterize healthcare as pretty safe, especially in the US, we would have 460 airplane crashes per day.
Wow.
So that really throws into
Wow.
perspective like the amount that we have is so tiny. The NHTSA said there's almost 99 fatalities per day and 7,500 injuries per day in cars. I would be surprised at my company if I hear more than 3 injuries per month.
Wow. And it's
And
it's
usually,
no small company.
yeah,
That's crazy.
and
Wow.
that's in relation to like inside an aircraft, right? Obviously, if somebody trips over a tow bar outside or something like that doesn't factor into this, but somebody happens to be up at the wrong time and there's some turbulence, somebody doesn't follow a procedure and closes a latch on their fingers, like those are the kinds of instances that I would hear about, and it's
Mm.
incredibly minute.
Wow. I mean, I always think it like for me to get from my house in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale area, down to Miami Airport, I always think I'm more likely to get into a car crash going to the airport than I am once I board that plane. But
Extremely
it's
so.
there's something about knowing the statistics is helpful, but then there's some primal instinct when you're in the air that kind of kicks in as a passenger, at least, where there's still a little bit of that fear, right? There's still a little bit of like, oh my God, what's that turbulence? Or the feeling when you take off and then like it kind of drops a little bit and you're kind of like, oh God, what's happening? So could you talk a little bit of those examples? And this can just help us. Like for me at least, like knowing information helps me like stop from spiraling because it's like okay it's that certainty of information. What are some of the like common reasons that people like spiral a little bit into that anxiety while they're traveling? Like what is happening during turbulence? What's happening during takeoff? What are some of the top things that you kind of like if you were to explain it to your kids why they're feeling certain things? What would you say, I guess?
Well, one of the things it'd probably be no surprise, don't need me to characterize that the unknown is always uncomfortable. So that's why when folks would rather have bad news than no news because
Totally.
the uncertainty is discomforting. And so when you don't know why we're taking so long or what was that sound, what was that bump, your imagination only has the opportunity to run wild, and our imaginations are pretty impressive. Turbulence on the whole, I even tried to dig through like NTSB reports and old stuff. I've never come across an instance where turbulence caused structural damage to an aircraft. I mean, there are C-130s that fly into hurricanes out of Louisiana. The hurricane hunters, they go right into the center of a hurricane. Now, granted,
Mm.
they're intentionally designed for that, but if you think of turbulence, turbulence is what it is. It's changes in direction and density and temperature within air, right? So it's just instability of air. If you think of when you're on a boat and you're going on nice glassy water, everything is smooth. When you're going on choppy water, you're bumping along and it's uncomfortable. It's the same general idea. I really kind of I oversimplified that. I'm sure there's some aeronautical engineers and folks out there that are probably like gagging right now at how simply I described that. But that's
It works
essentially
for
what it is.
me. I'm the
Yeah,
average listener, so that description works for me.
yeah. It's just air density changes and rough air. The air is always going up and down and changing directions. If you go this altitude, it might be going one way, and you drop down, it's going another way. So it's just kind of churning about. Some of the more common things that generate turbulence, clouds. When you go through clouds, there's a change in air density, and so those are typically a little bit more bumpy. If you're in closer proximity to a thunderstorm, there's energy that gets dissipated off of that. And so you get a lot of that churning air, which is why we try to stay at least, 10 to 20 miles away from a thunderstorm. Those things all cause that. But you can be on a completely clear day with nothing but blue skies in front of you, and you can be in turbulent air. There's not really a way to visually see that. But of course, from the back of the aircraft, we're like, is this good? Is this bad? Is it going to get worse? When's it going to stop? And so I can see that being, especially for folks that don't have the view that we have, right? We're seeing the front of the airplane, so we know what's out front. Everyone else is looking out the side and just kind of guessing.
Yeah, and is that why it's important to kind of keep the seatbelt on, even if the seatbelt sign's off? Can you talk a little? Let's talk about the seatbelt sign. It's kind of controversial. I was just on a plane Saturday. So, what is this? 4 days ago. Just on a plane Saturday. The seatbelt sign is on. I am like zipping myself tight. I'm like, all right, here we go. I got my kid on my lap. I got my other kid next to me. I am like, when that seatbelt sign goes on, I am on it. And there's people getting up, going to the bathroom. They're saying on the intercom 1,000 times, like, the seatbelt sign is on, please sit down. You can't use the bathroom. Like, and just constantly people are getting up. So I guess it's kind of a two-parter. I'll start with the first part. Let's talk a little bit about when is it like, okay, we're going to turn the seatbelt sign on, and what's the reasoning? Like, is it to keep us safe during turbulence in case there ends up being like really rough, ends up being like pretty intense, or what's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So 10,000 feet's a special number. Below 10,000 feet is kind of a sacred area, right? So the expectation is everyone's in their seats, everyone has their seatbelt on. We're close to the ground. We're not talking about things that aren't related to the airplane. We're not talking about the FSU football game last night. We're not talking about, where we're going hiking. And that's also why the flight attendants are seated. There's no
Mm,
PAs, etc. But once we get above that, usually the seatbelt sign will often remain on until we're level because we don't know what that ride's going to look like until we're there.